Under the golden haze of Los Angeles afternoons, the bold and the beautiful had always wrapped its characters in a tapestry of beauty and betrayal, but the threads running through Deke Sharp's redemption arc had begun to fray into something far darker. His struggle to rebuild his life after years of chaos was never going to be easy, but what he didn't expect was that the ghosts of his past, and the people he once thought he could save, would conspire to drag him back into the shadows he was fighting to escape. Remy had always been trouble wrapped in charm. When he first appeared in Deke's world, it was easy to mistake his recklessness for youthful rebellion. But behind the restless energy, there was a deep, festering wound. He had come from the same underbelly that Deke knew too well, the one that taught survival before sincerity, manipulation before mercy. When Deke took him under his wing, it wasn't just mentorship, it was atonement. He saw in Remy a reflection of his own broken younger self, someone who could still be saved if only given a chance. But redemption is fragile, and the weight of the past doesn't lift simply because one wills it to. The cracks began to show when Luna Nozawa, a name long cursed in Forrester circles, resurfaced in Remy's orbit. Against everyone's advice, he visited her in prison, a decision that would prove catastrophic. Luna was a magnet for chaos even from behind bars. The whispers, the lies, the allure of her tragedy, all of it drew Remy in. He believed he was helping, offering compassion where the world had shown cruelty. What he didn't realize was that Luna, ever manipulative, used his visits to manipulate her narrative, leaking details that painted Deke as complicit in her downfall. By the time the gossip columns got hold of the story, Deke's name was once again poisoned, this time not because of his own actions, but because of Remy's misguided loyalty. For Deke, the timing couldn't have been worse. He had finally begun therapy with Dr. Taylor Hayes, the one person who seemed to see through his bravado and into the storm underneath. Their sessions began professionally. Taylor was steady, measured, and kind in that distant way therapists must be. But as Deke peeled back layers of guilt, shame, and anger, something between them shifted. It wasn't romance, not at first, but something subtler, more dangerous, recognition. Taylor understood his longing for redemption because she was living her own version of it. The mistakes she had made in her past still shadowed her, and helping Deke became more than a duty. It became proof that she could still heal others even as she struggled to heal herself. The bond grew quietly, like ivy creeping up a wall. They spoke about forgiveness, about rebuilding identity, about the fear of never escaping one's reputation. But beneath those conversations was a current neither could name. Deke began scheduling sessions more frequently, staying later, lingering over coffee afterward. Taylor told herself she was maintaining boundaries, yet she felt the lines blur with every confession he made. The world outside saw a therapist and her patient. Inside that office, they were two damaged souls circling the possibility of absolution through each other. Sheila Carter, of course, saw everything. To her, Deke's newfound attachment to Taylor wasn't healing, it was betrayal. She had stood by him when no one else would, endured mockery and isolation because she believed in their strange, toxic loyalty. Deke had been her redemption story as well, proof that even a woman like her could inspire love from someone good. But now, watching him pour his confessions into Taylor's gentle hands, she felt something curdle inside her. Envy, betrayal, possessiveness, it was all the same hunger dressed in different masks. Sheila's love was never about trust, it was about control. And if Taylor was stealing Deke's soul piece by piece, then Sheila would find a way to take it back. Remy, meanwhile, was unraveling. The fallout from Luna's death had shattered whatever thin stability he'd managed to build. Forrester Creations had quietly blacklisted him. Deacon's restaurant refused his bookings. Even the tabloids that once adored his scandalous charm had turned on him. He was drowning, and the only person he believed could throw him a lifeline was Deke. But every attempt to reconnect ended in failure. Deke was too preoccupied, too focused on his therapy, his new path, his quiet connection to Taylor. That rejection sent Remy spiraling into the same self-destructive patterns that had ruined his youth. Alcohol, bad company, and impulsive rage became his companions once more. The breaking point came when Remy showed up uninvited at a Forrester fashion event. Cameras flashed as he staggered onto the stage, slurring accusations that Deke had abandoned him, that the Forresters were hypocrites profiting off other people's misery. Security escorted him out, but the damage was done. The next morning, the headline screamed, "Ex-con protege implodes at Forrester Gala, Deacon Sharp's redemption tarnished?" Overnight, Deke's name became synonymous with scandal again, and the fragile progress he'd made began to crumble. That was when Sheila made her move. She found Remy in a cheap motel, surrounded by empty bottles and self-pity, and offered him something he couldn't refuse, a chance at revenge disguised as redemption. "You want Deke back?" she asked softly. "You want him to see you again? To need you again? Then help me expose Taylor Hayes for what she really is." Her plan was insidious. Together, they would fabricate evidence suggesting that Taylor had crossed ethical lines in her sessions with Deke. Whispered rumors would become leaked documents, confidential recordings twisted into something salacious. They would make it appear as though Taylor had exploited Deke's vulnerability, violating the sacred boundaries of therapy for her own emotional gain. Remy hesitated at first. Somewhere deep down, he still had a sliver of conscience. But Sheila knew exactly which wounds to press. She reminded him of how Deke had chosen Taylor over him, how the world always protected the respectable people while condemning those like them. "We're the forgotten ones," she said, her voice dripping with conviction. "The ones they use and discard. You and I were the same." In that moment, Remy saw her not as a manipulator, but as an ally. He agreed. The plan unfolded with terrifying precision. Anonymous tips were sent to the medical board. Photos, doctored, yet convincing, surfaced online showing Deke and Taylor in moments of supposed intimacy outside the clinic. Audio clips leaked, heavily edited to sound like confessions of love exchanged between therapist and patient. The media pounced. Overnight, Taylor's professional reputation was in ruins. Colleagues distanced themselves. Former patients questioned her integrity. The board demanded an investigation, and suddenly, the woman who had dedicated her life to helping others found herself accused of predation. Deke was blindsided. When the first reports broke, he couldn't believe it. He knew Taylor better than that, or at least he thought he did. But doubt has a way of creeping into even the strongest convictions. He began to question their closeness, replaying moments in his mind that once felt innocent, her hand brushing his when she offered comfort, the lingering eye contact, the shared silences that stretched too long. Had he misread everything? Had she crossed a line, or had he? The guilt was unbearable. Taylor, meanwhile, was quietly collapsing under the weight of public judgment. Every professional she had ever respected now looked at her with suspicion. Her license was suspended pending review. The press camped outside her house. Even her family, Ridge, Steffi, Thomas, struggled to defend her without reopening old wounds about her past breakdowns. Alone in her home office, Taylor stared at the framed degrees on her wall, now symbols of a life that might be over. But what hurt more than the accusations was Deke's silence. He hadn't called. He hadn't defended her publicly. She told herself he was confused, torn, but deep down, she feared he believed it. Sheila and Remy watched the destruction from the sidelines, satisfied. But power built on deceit always rots from within. Remy began to unravel again, haunted by the magnitude of what they'd done. He had wanted to hurt Deke, to make him feel the same abandonment he'd felt, but seeing Taylor broken and humiliated didn't bring satisfaction. It brought shame. The final straw came when Sheila, ever the puppet master, hinted that Taylor's career wasn't enough. "People forget," she hissed. "If she wants to play the victim, maybe it's time she pays the ultimate price." Remy recoiled. He hadn't signed up for violence. For all his flaws, he wasn't like Sheila. In a desperate act of conscience, Remy went to Deke. It was late, the city wrapped in the heavy silence of regret. "You have to listen," he pleaded. "Taylor didn't do anything wrong. It was Sheila, it was me. We made it all up. Deke's face hardened. Why should I believe you now? Remy broke then, tears cutting through his self-loathing. Because I can't live with it. I thought I was hurting you, but I destroyed the only person who ever tried to help either of us. Deke's world tilted again, but this time he moved quickly. He went to Taylor, armed with Remy's confession and whatever fragments of evidence he could recover. Together, they pieced the truth back together, submitting proof to the medical board that the accusations were fabricated. Sheila's plan unraveled in the light of exposure. She vanished before the police could reach her, leaving chaos in her wake. Remy, racked with guilt, turned himself in, choosing prison over the unbearable weight of freedom tainted by betrayal. When the dust settled, Taylor was reinstated, though the experience left scars no therapy could erase. Deke stood by her as she faced the board, not as a patient but as a friend, perhaps something more, though both were too wary to name it. Their connection, born in vulnerability, now existed on fragile terms of forgiveness and restraint. Remy's story ended in a small, dimly lit cell, ironic, perhaps, for a man who had once chased the spotlight. But there, in the quiet, he began to write letters.
To Deke.
To Taylor. Even to Luna's memory. Letters filled with apologies and half-formed prayers for redemption. He knew the world would likely never read them, but he wrote anyway, as if every sentence could chip away at the darkness he had helped create. And as for Deke and Taylor, their paths would never again be simple. In a city built on illusion, they had both learned the same hard truth. Healing doesn't come from forgetting the past, but from facing it, even when it hurts. Sheila was still out there, watching, waiting, her vengeance unfinished. But for now, the storm had passed, leaving only the quiet hum of survival. Because in the bold and the beautiful, redemption is never free. It's earned through the ashes of what was lost, and it always comes at the cost of innocence. The night Los Angeles fell silent around Taylor Hayes was the night she truly understood the difference between fear and despair. Fear was temporary. It came in flashes, sharp and definable. But despair was quieter. It crawled beneath the skin and stayed. For weeks, she had been trying to rebuild herself after the nightmare Sheila and Remy had unleashed, clinging to her reinstated license like a fragile thread of dignity. The investigation had cleared her name, yes, but it hadn't restored her peace. Gossip still lingered like smoke, her colleagues still whispered behind closed doors, and every new patient who sat across from her seemed to look not at her eyes, but through her, to the scandal that refused to die. It began again slowly, almost imperceptibly. Anonymous calls at odd hours. A car idling too long outside her home. A letter slipped beneath her door, written in red ink that bled through the paper. You don't deserve to heal others when you're the disease. At first, she dismissed it as the residue of tabloid obsession, someone desperate for attention. But then, things escalated. Her computer files were hacked, private notes deleted. A photo of her and Deke, taken without their knowledge, appeared on a gossip site with a fabricated headline, Therapist Rekindles Affair with Ex-Patient. The smear campaign was alive again, reborn with a vengeance. Taylor didn't know that Sheila had returned to Los Angeles. For months, she had disappeared into the underbelly of Nevada, plotting, waiting. When her schemes collapsed and Remy turned himself in, she had been forced into exile. But exile only sharpened her cruelty. The humiliation of watching her plan fail burned in her veins like acid. And while most would have let it go, Sheila Carter had never been capable of letting go. She believed in revenge the way others believed in prayer. To her, destroying Taylor wasn't just punishment, it was restoration. Remy, in contrast, had tried to repent. His confession had freed Taylor but condemned him. Behind bars, he found no absolution, only regret. His letters to Deke and Taylor went unanswered. Every night, he dreamed of Luna, of the chaos he'd caused, of Taylor's eyes the last time he'd seen her, hurt, betrayed, yet still human enough to pity him. That pity haunted him more than hate ever could. When a guard slipped him a burner phone one night, He thought it was fate offering a final chance to make things right. But the voice on the other end wasn't Deke's or Taylor's. It was Sheila's. She spoke softly, almost lovingly. "You and I have unfinished business, Remy. You tried to undo me, but I don't hold grudges. I hold opportunities." Her tone was sugar over venom. She told him she could get him out, reduce his sentence, erase his name from the scandal, if he helped her one last time. Remy hesitated. He didn't want to be part of her madness again. But guilt is a leash, and Sheila knew how to pull it. "She ruined you," she whispered. "She let you rot so she could play the victim. Don't you want her to feel what you felt? Alone. Powerless. Disgraced." Days later, Remy was released early on a technicality. No one questioned how. He showed up at Taylor's clinic unannounced, trembling, eyes hollow but pleading. "I just wanted to apologize," he said. Against her better judgment, Taylor let him in. She could never quite stop believing in broken people. It was her greatest gift and her fatal flaw. They spoke for hours. Remy cried. Taylor offered compassion, perhaps too easily. She didn't see the glint of calculation flicker through his tears, or how his hand trembled not from guilt, but anticipation. Over the next few weeks, Remy became a constant presence. He brought her flowers, offered to volunteer at her clinic, helped her repair damaged relationships in the community. Everyone saw a man reborn, repentant. Even Deke softened, though something in him remained uneasy. He wanted to believe Remy was sincere, but every instinct screamed otherwise. When he mentioned his doubts, Taylor defended Remy fiercely. "He's trying, Deke," she insisted. "You, of all people, should understand what it means to be given another chance." But the redemption Remy sought wasn't salvation, it was revenge wearing a saint's smile. Under Sheila's instruction, he began planting seeds. Confidential files vanished again. Patient records leaked. Small rumors spread about Taylor's instability, her dependence on anti-anxiety medication, her emotional entanglements with patients. A few weeks later, a video surfaced online, a grainy, manipulated clip of Taylor in a heated argument with an unidentified man. It was fake but convincing. The board reopened her case. Sponsors withdrew. Her career began to unravel for a second time. Meanwhile, Sheila remained invisible. She fed Remy just enough encouragement to keep him obedient, watching from the shadows as her puppet danced. But Remy's guilt began to morph into madness. He had thought exposing Taylor would bring him relief, but instead it hollowed him out. He saw her face everywhere, in dreams, in reflections, in the quiet moments when silence felt like judgment. He started drinking again. When he called Sheila, begging her to stop, she laughed. "You wanted redemption, Remy. You wanted to prove you weren't the monster. But here you are, doing my work for me." The breaking point came one night when Taylor returned home to find her office door ajar. Inside, the room was trashed, books scattered, photos shattered, her therapy notes shredded into ribbons across the floor. In the center of the desk was a single object, her own name tag from the hospital, smeared with blood. Panic clawed up her throat. She called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. They told her it was likely a prank, a sick obsession from a fan. But Taylor knew better. This had Sheila written all over it. Deke begged her to leave town for a while, to come stay with him. She agreed reluctantly. But safety, as she would soon learn, is just another illusion in Sheila's world. One evening, while Deke was out closing the restaurant, Taylor heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, Remy stood there, soaked, trembling, his eyes wild with something between fear and mania. "She's coming for you," he whispered. "I try to stop her, but she won't let me go." Taylor reached for her phone, but before she could call Deke, the lights went out. When they flickered back on, Sheila was standing in the doorway. Time seemed to fracture. The room shrank to a suffocating blur of breath and heartbeat. Sheila's face was calm, almost maternal. "Taylor," she said softly, "you took something from me. You took him." She gestured toward Deke's photo on the wall. "You think you can fix people, make them better. But you break them. You broke Remy. You broke me. Taylor tried to reason with her, her voice trembling but steady. Sheila, you don't have to do this. You're not beyond help. That was her mistake. The word help made Sheila laugh, cold, brittle, humorless. You think you can help me? After what you did? You made me watch you turn him into someone who looks at me with pity. You made me nothing again. What happened next was chaos. Remy lunged between them, desperate to stop what he'd set in motion. Sheila turned on him, fury exploding in her eyes. You had one job, she screamed. You were supposed to destroy her, not fall apart. The struggle was fast and brutal, a blur of movement, the crack of glass, a flash of something metallic. When it was over, Sheila stood frozen, a shard of broken mirror in her hand, blood dripping from its edge. Remy lay motionless on the floor. Taylor dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound, sobbing. Call an ambulance, she begged. But Sheila just stood there, breathing hard, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she dropped the shard, wiped her hands on her jacket, and whispered, Now you'll understand what it means to lose something you tried to save. By the time the sirens arrived, Sheila was gone. The police found traces of her at the scene, but no trail to follow. Remy survived the night, barely. In his hospital bed, pale and trembling, he told Deke everything. The lies, the manipulation, the final confrontation. I thought I was helping her, he whispered, tears mixing with morphine haze. But she owned me. I tried to make her stop. I swear. Taylor sat beside him, her hand shaking as she reached for his. She didn't hate him. There was no space for hate left in her. Only sorrow, for him, for herself, for the endless cycle of redemption that seemed to consume everyone who reached for it. Deke found Sheila's car days later, abandoned near the coast. Inside was a single photograph, Taylor, Deke, and Remy, taken from a distance, their faces blurred by sunlight. On the back, in Sheila's handwriting, were 4 words that chilled him to the bone. It's not over yet. And maybe it never would be. Because in the world of the bold and the beautiful, evil doesn't vanish, it evolves. Sheila was still out there, watching, waiting. Taylor had survived, but survival came at a price. Remy's blood was on her hands, Deke's heart was fractured by guilt, and the fragile peace they had rebuilt was once again balanced on a knife's edge. The city outside glittered as if nothing had happened. But for those who had lived through Sheila's vengeance, every shadow, every whisper of wind carried the same question. How do you heal when the past keeps finding new ways to hurt you? And somewhere, in the silence that followed, Taylor Hayes realized the truth she had spent her life avoiding, that sometimes the only way to survive the darkness is to stop believing it can be cured.